Ne jana ko wo wo be ha den ste. Ne jana ko den go be ha den ste. Hey yana hey 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 yana. Ne jana ko wo wo yoth kwe be ha den ste. Ne jana ko wo wo be ne takis.
أكون عجبي شيء نعيش شؤون converged أكودي أول بها إسرائيلية شد نو جوي السبب الكانك جوبي خشنا أول جنو يجا على إن ليش ننا هلون أولياء باكون سن ليش شندا والخارج إيش ولا بشياجة إن شخا هذا بقول جن بجنو جو إيخد إسات ولا نني إيخد باكنسن أحيانا.
You know, there's a song from Bruce Springsteen, and it's our anthem song, because when we're down and out, I put that song on, and it you know, it says there's going to be hard times coming, there's going to be good times coming, but there's also going to be hard times coming. Swing that ball at me, because I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work as hard as I can to do what needs to be done. You know, it's just being honest and upfront and working your butt off. You know, bring that wrecking ball on is all I can say, and that's what the word, you know, is that.
I'm so excited for today's conversation. We are here joined by Nanibaa Beck. I have been so excited to bring her on. The first time I met her, I know at a funeral, so it wasn't necessarily appropriate, I guess, to come like running across the floor to be like, hey, I love your work. So I kind of hung back in the background during that time. But since then, I've had the opportunity to work with Nanibaa's husband, as well as now establishing this conversation. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I would love to introduce Nanibaa Beck to our conversation series. Hi, Nanibaa, how are you doing?
Hey, Christine. It's nice to see you and everyone who has been helping you behind the scenes, like Crystal and Kayla. So to you guys. And it's been good to actually be able to talk to you guys about these, about basically the work my father and I do together. So, but just my introduction in Dinethazad, Nanibaa Nishlan, Zadishkijni Dashache, Do Ishihi Dashanella, Oswake. I'm nervous, so Tatna Satni Nishlan, Klazustana Bashishchin, Zadishkijni Dashache, Do Ishihi Dashanella. My father is going to be sitting this one out at the last minute, but I know that the work that you'll be able to see today will definitely, you'll be able to see how it continues into the work I'm doing right now. And he'll be living with me, so we'll be working more in the future together.
That's really exciting. Being able to have that type of intergenerational connection is, it's intimidating sometimes. I remember bringing home some of my weavings from my grandmother to inspect, and so that was really intimidating. But I'm assuming that you guys have a really great working relationship as well.
Yeah, it's been, you know, I started helping him when I was 13 years old with my mom and I in the same studio. So it's been incredible to work alongside him, and it's been a learning experience that I didn't realize I was having at the time, because you're there to help family. And you're right, it is intergenerational. In my immediate family, we have 4 generations, and my brother is 20 years younger. My mom and my dad are both in different generations. So having all those insights of how we, you know, create and have grown with this work, these creations, has been really incredible. So I'm pretty lucky, you know, to have my dad next to me, to be willing to sit down and obviously give me feedback. He's never one to back down from giving me feedback. So
no, that's great. I like how you brought up the point that like you weren't really actually knowing that that's what you were learning. My aunts are silversmith, my husband's a silversmith, so a lot of times I get stuck with the jobs like the buffing, and so you don't necessarily learn that you're doing all of these skills and learning all of these different techniques until you sit down. And like for me, when I sit down and I talk to my instructors and my students, then they're like, oh, well, we're doing this, and I'm like, hey, I know what you guys are doing. Child labor, I like it.
yeah, that's basically it. So I wish I had paid more attention to so-called child labor while butchering a sheep. I still need help with that, but it's been really cool. It's you know, and you're right. I feel like my patience and also slight meditation. It is meditation when you're sitting and you're paying attention to doing each of these pieces hand by hand. You're learning it the hard way, and you know, there's that saying basically that patience. You know, you have to learn the fundamentals to have fun. So that's what it's been like so far.
Yep, that's definitely true. Just watching like even our students grow in our program here, they have like these wonderful expectations that they're going to pull off this like 11-piece.
And it seems like I have slow internet.
No, you're coming through okay over here. So don't worry if there's a little bit of a lag. We can always work with that. So today we brought you on and to talk about, well, first of all, your relationship. We brought you on to talk about your relationship with your dad and your mom and growing up in a silversmithing family, and also to take a look at, for example, the different levels of the challenges that you've had to go through in order to obtain the various level of successes that your family has been able to come through, and to be fortunate enough to dedicate your lives to this particular Navajo cultural art. So I guess one of the questions that we have to start out with is, what do you feel from your perspective is the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome as a Navajo artist?
I feel the biggest challenge was to find a way to not only create a style that is distinctive to me, separate from my father's, but to mostly, and the growth of it has been to maintain a connection with what we learn as Diné, and for it to exude naturally without it having to be explained over and over. My work is for people who love the pieces and are loving just the culture and the way that it moves them. But over time, for example, my language necklaces, there are words that I feel like I've decided to not make for a wide audience. And that was something I grappled with because it was something that I hadn't acknowledged, and it was slowly something that became more in front of my mind to say, this is a word that I want to make sure I make only for Diné, versus having it like sold at a show for people who are non-natives, who yes are appreciative, but at the same time, with Dinepazad in particular, the pieces are in Dinepazad. The necklaces that I create are in Dinepazad. So I want those to be part of a conversation starter among us as Indigenous people with other people, be it non-natives or Indigenous. And that's been something that I've been most connecting with in terms of the challenges and difficulty. And also just providing all the information online. I think online has been something that is a different avenue for Diné artists. And so we can do the research that we want online to find what we're looking for. But as we grow from our relatives, Marquette, into elders, we are always bringing in information that we kind of either want to keep close to our hearts or that we want to express in our creative ways. And so that is my challenge, but it's also something that when it does become something to something like the pieces that you are seeing right now, I love it. I think it obviously provides, it shows the intention that goes into it, and also shows the uniqueness of my perspective that I have gained mostly from being next to my father, just like that, looking over and seeing my father work, and you know, understanding that, you know, family also has a huge hand in creating these pieces, taking photos together. So it comes down from the macro parts of finding your style, how you want it to be how you want to exude that as Danette jewelry, and then allowing that to kind of filter into your life. And, you know, what is it that you want to bring out from those filters into the pieces that you create? That's the cycle, but it's also the challenge. So being intentional has been a good challenge.
And that, you know, I think that that's such a great point. And we've had other speakers and guests who have talked about having specific audiences, especially the net audiences. Corey Begay was one of them. You know, he just really has a passion for, you know, making sure that his pieces, some of his pieces, right, go to Navajo families and Navajo homes. And so he was really careful in terms of addressing it, because he didn't want to come off, you know, in terms of, well, you know, exclusive, but in some aspects, when you create, you do have that audience in mind. And so I definitely appreciate those pieces, those particular pieces that you make in terms like the clans and using Navajo language. How has your sawing skills improved by making those?
Oh, much better, much better. The first time I started making them, I was using a, this is a technical thing, but I was using a 1/0. I had to figure out exactly what drill to use. And then finally, only recently have I gotten the templates that you can match your drill size to, and then you can place your little saw into those templates of the drill template to get the right drill for the saw that you're using. And it's been a work in progress. I've been doing it for 7 years. So it's, oh gosh, Christine, it's been much better than in the beginning, but it's pretty meditative. It's, I do still get nervous whenever I do pieces in gold, and because it's not a wonderful thing to feel like I've done things, and I've done all 4 clans on one pendant, and I had to do it a couple times because I messed up in the middle of it. So it's all done by hand, but that's the process, right? You have to, the word in itself is tracing along the line, and that's basically what I'm doing with these pieces, but with a very small saw.
Yeah, I just saw that, and we were, because we were going through photos. Well, before I even had met you and you were coming on, I was looking at it. I was like, these are really cool. I even like the asymmetrical components too, even with the language, and they're just cute. They just always made me smile. And so, but I always think about, man, that sawing, that's got to be intense. And our NCAP coordinator, Crystal, she made a quintachini. I think it was a bracelet a couple months ago. And so I remember her going through the sawing process, and I was like, wait till you get to Nanibaa Beck's status, and it'll be a piece of cake.
Oh, it's incredible. Honestly, when it comes down to the pieces that you see, and this is something that I see in other silversmiths, but mostly I love looking at the hands of any metalsmith or silversmith, because you will see that they have, like, for example, Robin Waney is an artist out of Santa Fe, and I talked with her and spoke with her, and I could see that she had cut part of her finger over and over, that the silver saw kind of created like this small slit that looks kind of like a tattoo right there. So it's really great to see the way that people do their work. And trust me, Crystal, you'll get there at some point for sure. I don't doubt it. So with the work that you get to do in the Navajo Arts program, you'll get there, but it'll hurt.
Going back, kind of jumping back to one of the topics that you had just brought up about like growing up and the experience. When was the first moment that you kind of sat back and you're like, no, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. Can you remember that moment?
So the moment that happened was, it was when the idea for the language necklaces really kicked in. I was resistant to it because I knew I could make pieces. I just didn't want to make pieces that didn't connect with who I was as a person versus like the daughter of Victor Beck, Sr. And it was really the language necklaces. I wanted to make something that had, I wanted to find a niche, but I wanted to find something affordable and accessible to our Indigenous people. And that was something that I could feel the purpose kind of seep in to create these conversation starters about Native jewelry in general, because one, we don't have, there's a lot of different price points at which we can buy jewelry from any tribe. And to make the pieces that are affordable, it is hard because sometimes it becomes a thing where you're spending so much time on these small pieces, but the return is not always great. The return for these language necklaces is it's enough as a price point, but the return of what you see as the interaction with the pieces and how they connect with the wearer, it's more incredible than I imagined. And at that point, I could finally understand what my father had mentioned so many years before, and up until that point, saying it's a source of pride to know that the person who is loving what you created from this the place of both prayer and the place of experience, and then the experience made into actual physical creation, and then how they connect that with their life. That at that point, because of these language necklaces, is what made me want to pursue it. And of course, I had my cheerleaders behind me. My mom, fiercest cheerleader, my sister, my brother, and they knew I had the ability to do it. And my father, of course, he knew I had it too, but my mom especially, and also some good friends of mine who knew I had made jewelry, but I just never shared anything with them. So I think the combination of the two, but mostly it's a personal thing. You have to, my dad says this more, is you have to want to do it for yourself. Ahwachadego, I think is the Dinepazad phrase, but that's kind of where it made sense. And at that point, it was like, that's where it snapped into place in my mind to know that this was a direction based off of also so much of the conversations that people have regarding Native jewelry and the conversation and topics surrounding Native American art.
No, definitely. And you can see that. You can actually feel that in your pieces. They're so well put together and balanced. Like I said, there's a lot of asymmetrical pieces that both you and your dad work with. And so it balances out. And I think that you can feel that philosophy that's associated, even with Sanaka and you take a look at how that duality components, they're not equals and they're not replicas of each other, but they balance each other in that. And so that's what I definitely pulled that from your pieces as well. So a little bit about your dad. Tell us, how did your dad get interested and introduced into the silversmithing world?
So my father has such an incredible story of it, but I know that when he was very, very early in his I think he must have been his early 30s, he was helping another friend of his sell jewelry. And this was in the 70s when going to parts of the United States like East Coast or the West Coast and selling a lot of jewelry made by other silversmiths to these galleries. And my father, looking at the pieces, thought to himself, I could make this. And he went to my grandparents, my Nellie lady and my Nellie. He asked them, for some money to help him fund not only this journey for him to take classes at NAU, but to also to just make his pieces. And he said that he would use the money that they loaned him and then pay it back to them. And he did. But before he did that, he had a hojonje before. And I take it back. So he had the hojonje because there was a transition that in his life where he just needed more guidance. And the hojonje, he had this dream where he lost a suitcase full of jewelry. And from that point, he kind of gathered those reflections of what he should do next. And that's what led him to wanting to make his own jewelry, wanting to take it upon himself to create his own version of these pieces, but from a place that could, just be from him versus other people. And he definitely knew exactly where to go. He had the support of my grandma and my grandpa. And when he was at NAU, I believe the other story was that he had to take he's actually one semester short of his undergrad. And it's because he decided to do this full time. And he actually he was wanting to go into a ceramics class and ended up taking a jewelry class instead, and that's what caught him. So if my dad had gone forward with being a ceramicist, it'd be a whole different setup happening back here. But it's really cool to see how his journey has kind of shifted him to going away from ceramicist, becoming a jeweler, having the experiences of what a person in the 70s had to do in order to market and to network jewelry, and then gaining some advice from my grandparents to figure out what direction to do. And from that, the hojonje led him to doing his work today. So he's been doing this since the 1970s. And so you can tell that there's so much of him that I know, but also I don't know. The other part of it is around the time I was born, my father became a council delegate. So he was the council delegate for Pinon area. And that's where he stopped for about 4 years and then picked up again after he was finished with his term. So that conversation is where Andrew, my husband, comes in and just divulges all this information that I just never knew my father. So he does a lot. He jeweler, he does prayers for our family. We grew up with NAC, so it's been really foundational to see the way that my dad interacts with his jewelry, and just seeing how he's grown from that. But really, it comes from prayer. He still prays every time he does finish pieces, and before he sends them off.
That's just really inspiring and comforting all at the same time. Do you feel that that part of his work and how he was guided through being Navajo and just our everyday way of life, how that has trickled into your own work?
For him and how it's trickled into my work, he's always been very. He's always been such a prayerful person. He's also he's very much of a family person, and he helps out when he needs to. Our relatives, our extended families have been around to receive prayers by him, have come to meetings for him and by him during my growth. And I think it's a lot of time also being in the studio and just sitting and reflecting on the pieces, sometimes in silence, sometime with Criminal Minds on in the background. So I've seen him always reflecting whatever's happening in his mind is a combination of just finding solutions, whether it's for what's needing to be done in the home, or what needs to be done with orders, or just thinking about different things that I just don't really know how to talk about with him. And for that, I see my view of what he has done, seeing him when you saw him hunched over the bench, the workbench, that's how I've seen him so often. And I didn't really understand it quite as much until I was in the studio myself. seeing him like and experiencing the exact same thing that he was going through. It's such a personal experience, to really amazing to not only hear more about my father's past and how he continues to grow, but also just creating a space for myself to, you know, focus and to grow from what I've learned from him over the years. It was really more when I started going to university that I started asking him questions about you know, more outside of family life, what the next experience was about. You know, let's talk about politics. Why did this happen in the 1980s? What do you understand? What is the trading post? Nellie worked in a trading post. So I think all of these different things and what I started learning in college also created a little bit more of a bridge between how I could connect with my father. Because I grew up mostly in Flagstaff and then also in Phoenix. Going back and forth was a very common thing for us, going back to Pinyon. But obviously, my childhood on the res, I don't really remember as much, except being like a little girl running after her dad and like getting candy at the Country Mart, or sheep herding with my relatives. It's definitely different. But my father just keeps on making pieces, and it's been great to be able to you know, pick his brain. But honestly, when it comes to my pieces, he's just amazed that I've been able to create in a way that I do. But it's only because of the past 39 years of me watching him, 39 years of him reminding us of what is necessary to think about when we're talking about jewelry, and understanding the dynamics of ke and what you do in between all those like big topics of being a Dene person. So it's a very long answer to your question.
Long is always good. You're talking to a long-winded person, so I completely understand. I guess, well, how would you guys, because you guys have a tremendous following, you know, how do you define success, and how do you know that you've hit a level of success thus far in your career?
You know, success is a lot of different, you know, monetary is the one thing that pops into mind, but that's not something that I think it's defined by. You know, honestly, success for me was getting recognition by Navajo Times for the first time. I think that was the that was the part where I'm like, oh my God, my people, they see the work that I'm creating. But also the other success was has been, oh man, seeing the number of, knowing that I've been approached by so many different young Dene or indigenous people with my language necklaces. And then knowing that, you know, they're the people who are having these like moments of knowing that a necklace that is around their neck in a word that they cherish. Like that is what I love so much. So success for me is really in the experience of happiness and joy, because I think so often we forget what grounds us to being Dene. And you know, success is understanding that the pieces that I'm creating are creating like a smile or just moments of happiness for people who just didn't know that these pieces could be made in our language by another Dene person who is just like at the same parts, all at once, just trying to figure things out in my life at the same time. So it's growth, and I appreciate that. And there was, you know, and the few times where my father has kind of given me that like, that's really good. What? Like, and I tease him and I'm like, do you know who my dad is? Like, my dad's Victor Beck. Of course I'm gonna make something like this. So I tease him, and because so much of what he does, I am a father, like my dad's daughter. So I want to be able to provide just a sense of knowing for him that, you know, things are good in terms of creating this continuity.
Because, you know, we define success in so many different ways, and we've had other guests on who really focus on the economic, and it's important. It's really, I mean, we know even now so many people are going through a little bit of a rough time, especially our artisans, right? Now that, you know, SWIA has transitioned online and the herd have transitioned online, and even though those organizations are truly doing their best to support, right, these artisans and these artists, it's just, that economic component is definitely there, but there's also so much more when we look at it, and the creation of these. So I guess one of the things, it's okay, my son's gonna start crying in a little bit pretty soon too. One of the things that we are interested here as well is and you talked a little bit about this, right? The tensions that exist between, you know, our cultural practices and then the art that we make and who your audience is. Do you see any other, you know, creative tensions that may exist between traditional silverwork and the more contemporary pieces that you guys are making?
I think just what you said there, that's a big distinction. And I don't think that that's a necessary distinction that we have to continue to abide by. Because when we think about the word traditional, first of all, the words traditional and contemporary, modern, and avant-garde, those are all arbitrary terms that were placed upon us and how we have to categorize ourselves on due to Western social standards or Western standards of the art world. And that's a huge contention just among the whole art world in general, period. So when I do think about my pieces, my dad has on his card contemporary silversmith. Fine, I like it, I love him, I think it's the way he wants to grow into, that's cool. But it has been interesting seeing that word on his card since my being a kid. And then understanding through conversations with other art historians and curators and just reading you know, papers about how we use those terms in our work can sometimes, it can be harmful, because if we allow ourselves to think in these two worlds of traditional and contemporary, and this whole idea of this two worlds, I'm part of two worlds, then what does that say about us being split up into two people? And for my jewelry, I feel like the word in itself, tradition, implies continuity. It implies the innovation that happens with time, growth, you adapt. And we've been able to do that so well in our culture. And Danette, you know, we had to adapt. We had to adapt, we had to move. And that's why we have such a huge land base to be around. Just a second, Parker. So the word that I like to use is I call my pieces traditional, again, because the word implies continuity, it implies the growth and innovation. And I think that it is important for us as just Danette and just Indigenous peoples that what we make is always going to be through a lens of our own person within our tribe. And I learned that through the Gasson family, Connie Gasson, David Gasson, Wayne Gasson, Jerry Sr., like Taz Gasson. Shout out to the Gasson family, because they were the first people that really allowed me to understand that, you know, you do have a unique perspective as a person within your tribe, but it's not something that you always have to you know, lay out for people in terms of traditional and contemporary. You are just you making the pieces that reflect who you are. And so, so I do see my pieces as traditional. And usually when I do say this to people, it is exactly like this. I'm giving them a 5-minute rundown of a huge topic within Native art world about something that we still have to talk about, because if they don't hear it from me, they're not going to hear it from any other person. I don't think so, unless they're reading in a paper, you know, at the Native American Arts Studies Association conference. So it is important to designate and to share that I do think my pieces are traditional. But if people want to go to art school, unfortunately, art school has to make you choose, well, then what is traditional? And I have friends who are artists. Matagi Sorensen, he said that he went to, in his, you know, in his MA, he had to designate and then prove why there is that distinction between traditional and contemporary work. So it's really interesting how we have to decolonize that mindset of how we think about our work, because traditional is continuous. Traditional is today. If we think about American traditions, then we're not talking about American traditions of like, they're not, you know, for some reason, just when you think about traditions applied to any other culture, you don't think about a certain time frame. So how is it as Danette? You know, we are always bringing with us the stuff that we want to take with us and grow, and that's everything. We've been able to hoist it up and be living people today within our culture, and I think that's incredible. So
Yay. No, I'm right on board. You're preaching to the choir here. You know, my husband always talks about those kinds of components of like this, the idea of having these two worlds. And the one thing that he really always really stresses, it's not necessarily about having two worlds, it's what you allow to fit in your one world. You have one world, and so what elements you bring to make your life even richer doesn't have to be split up into a binary. It doesn't have to be on a continuum. It's all about, you know, what you choose, that concept of self-determination, right? And how that gets, how do you like embody that self-determination on what you choose to include in your one world. So so definitely. And it's when we were building the BFA program here, because we have two BFA well, actually we have 5 tracks of BFA programs here at Danette College, and we were getting ready to add on silversmithing and weaving, which we're so excited about. The question came up, well, how are you going to have these traditional arts fit into these fine arts tracks? And so that's where I was like, this is where we need to start to change our mindset, that fine arts and the traditional arts, how do we start bringing them together on not necessarily equal grounds, but into dialogue to see where are those universalism and how are they different, just because they're different emphasis areas and the origins may have different origin in terms of geographic location. So no, I definitely, and then we definitely need some time to talk about those up in the public realm as well. I guess one of the things that we could take a look at and kind of pick your brain about now would be, so you brought up a little bit about you like indirectly about like holistic well-being, and what is it that you do as an artist, I guess from like a holistic background or, you know, perspective, to make your work for you. So like, for example, is there any kind of routine that you like to utilize? You talked a little bit about meditation, how your work functions, but do you have any kind of ploy that you use to help, you know, settle in with your work schedule and start producing good work?
well, I do have people who I surround myself with who do provide a reminder to check back into yourself. And I have to definitely give love to my friend Jackie Russell, because I think she's been the person to remind me to take time out for myself. And I'm trying to look for it. Here it is. And I bring this up whenever, but this is one thing that we made. We're doing one of our gatherings, but it's just a mason jar. And at this gathering, all the girls got together and wrote on a piece of paper. And on a piece of paper, you pull out what it is that is wrote on it. And for example, this one says, take a breath in your favorite chair or coffee shop, or your favorite, and over your favorite tea, coffee, drink, and know you're freaking amazing. So it's one of these things that I think, you know, through just our gatherings as like just friends, and just small things that you can find in Oprah magazine, or you know, recommendations that you get through a Calm app, and mostly podcasts. It's I like to listen to Call Your Girlfriend, or of course the All My Relations app with Matika and Adrienne Keene. Those are the ones that kind of, in their own small ways, you are focusing on what's being discussed, but then you're also being reminded, and through these different things that I've kind of allowed myself to listen to, that take a deep breath and relax, take some tea. And I'm not doing it as much these days, but it is something that I have started to take time out where I'll just zone out, and my husband will ask me what I'm doing, and it's basically me just like taking a small breath, or taking, you know, gathering myself in bed before I have to, you know, get up and do something. So finding a way to just connect again to where you are. And honestly, I think it just comes down to breathing in slowly, breathing out slowly, and just reminding yourself of what your surroundings are beyond the four walls that you're within. You know, going outside, understanding that there's breath and there's air, to understand that there's heat, and you know, your feet are on ground, and just kind of taking a drink of water. And those are, you know, it's very simple, but it is something that when I do remember that there's so much more out there beyond myself, and that focuses me so much, especially since COVID has been taking place. And there's no routine to it. You just have to find like what works for you. I can't watch TV and work. I have to listen to a good podcast or a good playlist. And usually my husband will have on some good music in the background. He won't. So I'll just put some headphones on and zone him out. Take my dog Parker for a walk. You know, it's finding a good routine, but also just putting in some time. I've taken a break from my studio work just to focus on family for a bit. And now I'm just kind of getting into easing into not only being new to this house that I'm in, but also being new to just a routine since my father just started living with us. So it's been good, but honestly, just taking time out. Like in this room right here, there's a weight and there's a yoga mat. And there are times you just breathe is the go-to for all of it, for sure.
Yep, no, I'm there with you. And you brought up the big sea monster, right? COVID-19, and just the need to breathe through everything that's going on and take care of yourselves. I guess my question is, how has COVID-19 impacted you and your dad's work? Do you see a distinction?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where the economics come in. We're definitely doing less sales since COVID, but at the same time doing well with sales. It's a bit weird. Not having an actual location to sit and connect with people like we do and so well is different. I have done the virtual shows, but it's I'm still getting used to it. You know, when you're sitting in front of a camera, having to just like, you know, bring someone in, it's a whole different. I mean, I'm a jeweler. My husband does more Zoom calls than I do, and my father is just, you know, he needs to see that person. We're very nonverbal people, so it's been interesting to see how things work in the time of COVID. But right now, though, we're okay, because I think my dad's just kind of holding back on doing more. I think he's easing into retirement, to be honest, and so, which is a good thing. But for me, it's been a matter of just not feeling. It took a while for me to realize that I could make the pieces and not feel so guilty with the fact that I wasn't. The work I wasn't doing wasn't going to help other people. So many things, like, you know, why am I going to try and sell like a $400 pair of earrings when so many other things are happening with people? And so it was kind of a thing that I had to grapple with mentally. And COVID's terrible. We've had relatives pass in my family, and that's been really hard to figure out, to see what we could, you know, help out. But it's I'm glad where it's at now with the, you know, possible vaccine coming in. But it is something where my dad and I have patience. We have optimism and we have patience. So those two characteristics are things that are helping us through this time. And the fact that I now live back in Arizona since moving from North Carolina.
I was going to ask you about that.
It's been incredible. Although I have to say, I really miss my friends in North Carolina. I see one of them right now on the Zoom call, but it's been an adjustment. But it's only because you know, you do have to go away to see what you have, Andrew did some great work at UNC, and now he's doing some awesome work with U of A. But we wanted my dad to live with us in Arizona, and now he finally is. And now I have to figure out a workspace for my father. But it is nice to not have to do mail order anymore, because there is a jewelry supply store just down the street from me, and I love it. And there are people who I can go and buy turquoise from, and it's more convenient. Tucson has been like the best place for us to convene in terms of like Andrew's space and my space. But when it comes down to just being closer to family has been so good. My auntie can call me, and it's not like 6 o'clock for her and 9 o'clock for me. And she just called me, and it's 8 o'clock, and I'm just barely waking up. So it's been great. I have to say that you do have to try out different places. And it's been something where I have been able to learn how to navigate being a better artist away from my father and away from everything that was familiar, and creating a studio space that I can work at that can become mine. Because up until about 3 years ago, I was in the same studio as my father, and that's different. It's very different. But it's been incredible to see the way that I've been asking friends what they do in their studio. How did they work with the humidity when I was living in North Carolina? What is it that you do for, I don't know, how else do you learn? And I've been able to take a couple of, try different things. I went to Penland School of Craft when I was in North Carolina for 2 months, and that was a really great learning experience. That's where I made those cups that are in the images I showed you. So forging and learning different skills, allowing yourself to try different things, and wherever you're living is really important.
I think we have those cups. Let me see if I could do a quick share screen. We have one of our artisans, Ephraim Anderson, we always call him Zephyr, and he was really interested in how to forge these cups. And so it definitely takes patience for sure. Definitely. So I guess, we're
absolutely
to wind down a little bit. One of the questions that we do have coming in is about how do you believe your art, you talked about your excitement seeing your work in the Navajo Times. How does your work impact the community? How do you feel that that's taking place?
Well, while I can't see how it's impacting the community, I do know that it is very slowly becoming, the conversation starters of the Dinepizad is really important. I am not a fluent speaker. I think it's important for people to understand that, but it's one of these things that I, as a young Diné person, I'm 39, I think I'm still young. I am still finding out ways of how we can grow and connect with our Diné tribe. And that was something that I know it's created a ripple effect. And I think that my favorite, also my favorite part of just kind of seeing what happens in terms of putting that out there is just, oh gosh, just knowing that it's part of a long line of other artists who are from our tribe, who have been on this land for time immemorial, making pieces and exchanging it through reciprocity, through that type of just exchanging, and that's still happening. And I think I am part of that wave that is still happening on this land. So whether it's something where it's as small, or as small as these necklaces that I'm making, it's from a line of makers that have been here since time immemorial. So that's where I really take satisfaction from that thought.
We are all about trading, so I will hook you up later.
Nice.
No, and it is. It's a valuable, and it's such an existent, right, economic system that we still utilize all the time. And so I'm glad that you were able to discuss that a little bit. One of the other questions that we have coming in is discussing how your work is impacting and is going to change the future of Navajo art. And you talked about it a little bit, right? Especially with your definition, even starting off with the definition of what traditional art is. But how do you feel that your work is contributing to the future of Navajo art as a whole?
I think it comes down to the intention of being forthright, forthcoming with why I call it traditional, why I choose not to use the word contemporary, but also mostly using the word Diné instead of Navajo. I correct myself when I'm speaking Navajo. You don't speak Navajo. That's not even a word that describes us as a people. It's Diné Bazad. And the Navajo, what is it? It's a Latinized word, like Navajo, and then got, it's a Pueblo word that got Latinized and got anglicized and then got connected with our federal government. And we still continue to use that as people, but we're not Navajo, we're Diné. So, when I talk about my jewelry and it's called Diné jewelry, people look at it and they have this, I love them because they're like, I get it. Like, I know what this is, but then I'm like, do you know what Diné means? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, it's also known as Navajo. And that's like, oh, that's where the connection is. So when we talk about the pieces, I think my work is really, I hope it emphasizes the intentionality with just those simple use of terms and also the simple use of just creating the this elegance and simplicity that exudes much about how we understand ourselves as Diné. For example, I use turquoise and also white shell. So I use the turquoise because we're made up of both male and female parts. Our left side is our turquoise, our male side, and our female side is the white shell, and that's the right side. And I think that that's what I use that so often within my work, because the intentionality is that that's so important when we think about the patriarchy that we're surrounded by from our matrilineal society and systems. And we have such a rich, complex background. And for some reasons, every once in a while, we forget that we're five-fingered people made up of both male and female sides. And as we go forward talking about our place within, today's 2020 society, to be Diné and to be Indigenous is sometimes a political thing, but it's just how we've been all this time. So with that said, I hope that in the small ways that I, talk about the intentionality of words and practice, I think that's kind of where I'll be able to guide some people into understanding the importance of referencing Diné instead of Navajo, referencing the simplicity and elegance within our stones, and also, talking about the continuity of what tradition implies. I think those are the three parts that I hope continue.
Take notes, everybody. Take notes. So, one of the last questions that we have for you today is, what advice would you give to up and coming Navajo artists or Diné artists in this realm of silversmithing?
A very real answer, first of all, is to understand your taxes. That's a very real fact. Understand the differences of federal tax, state tax, and also the way that you don't collect tax on people who live on the res. That's important. Another just basic conversation of advice would be to know that where you are in life when you decide to move forward in your work is exactly where you need to be to grow with that work. I became an artist when I was 30, many years after taking anthropology classes, art history, and American Indian studies, and thinking that I wanted to become a curator or someone in museums. And I did all the internships, and then worked with native nonprofits or humanities organizations, and that wasn't the place. What surprised me was that the quiet space I found sitting next to my father was where I was able to shine and grow, and really place everything that I had gained experience-wise and into pieces I have. So that's my journey, and who knows where all of these other Diné with their own unique perspectives and journeys and experiences can lead them in terms of how they create, move into expressing those creative expressions. It's really amazing, because everything you see from a native artist is one indigenous person who is living right alongside us and showing them exactly how they want to be seen in their work. And I think that's incredible. So I would say start where you are, because you can blossom anywhere you're planted.
I love that as well, because when we were talking to Bahi Whitethorn last month, he was talking about the fact that he started his career in his mid to late 30s. So it's not like there's necessarily an age limit on it. Just start. And so I think that's just really powerful advice that we take advantage of it, guys, especially now that we have a little bit more time, at least at home, right? I have a little bit more time at home. Just start off. So Nanibaa, I wanted to say thank you. I also wanted to, I have a couple questions. Are you going to be in the winter market for SWAIA?
Yes, I'm definitely. Yeah, and I'm gonna. Speaking of, I need to follow up with the herd too. It's really cool to see the way that they are taking the initiative of doing things by virtual. And I'm still at a learning curve. I found out that some of the other artists, like Penny Singer, she utilized the heck out of Zoom and putting that on Facebook Live, and it's really amazing. On the back end, other artists sharing what they can do to maximize the audiences for whatever show is coming up. So it's been great to see how we are navigating that as a community behind the scenes, artists talking to other artists. But for me, I help my dad, so everything you see online for him is going to be the work of me. And many hours of just figuring out things are not going to freeze up on Zoom. And so it's definitely a process, but it's worth it, because this is what we do. We have to adapt, and that's a big thing. And I know that we've been able to do that so well, and it's going to continue.
Awesome. So we and everybody watching, please check out the SWAIA Winter Market. Take a look at our artists, not just our Navajo artists, but all of our indigenous peoples that are selling out there. Make sure that you check those out, especially since the holidays are coming around. Check out the herd for sure. And then Nanibaa, what's the name of tell us a little bit about your online website. How can people contact you there?
So first, my father's website is victorbeck.com, and my website is notabove.com. Not above is my favorite mispronunciation of my name, Nanibaa, and it's notabove.com. And most of the time, I'm probably most active on Instagram, but of course, Facebook owns Instagram, so I pop things over to Facebook from posting on Instagram. It's a whole interesting process I have not taken advantage of as much, but it's notabove.com and victorbeck.com.
Awesome. Sounds good. We'll put that down below so that people can jump on to check out your stuff for sale. Nanibaa, if you want to go ahead and sign us off.
Again, to the Diné College, and also to Crystal and Christine, of course. It's been really great talking to you, and also just connecting with people out there, because I think what Diné College is able to do for their scholarship funds and just for their future students is incredible. Nisago and Hagone.
Ne jonako wo wo be hadenste. Ne jonako digin go be hadenste. Hey yana, hey 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 yanga.